I don't know exactly what, but it has to do with it. Taking vengeance on the person who executed her husband or father or uncle or whoever, whatever their relationship was. And that's a good paper if you can sort out their relationship. That would be useful to anyone, try to sort out that relationship. Finally, one last footnote to all of this. Perhaps the biggest Christian catacomb in Rome is called the Domitilla Catacomb. I visited it. It's a very big catacomb. It's built on her property. She gave her property over, or her descendants gave her property over for Christian burial. That shows how much of a Christian she was. She was a wealthy aristocrat, obviously. How many have ever heard of the Domitilla Catacomb? Yeah, well, it's the biggest one in Rome. It's named after her. And this says something else. This says more about the commitment of these people. Something was going on there in the imperial family. And that would not be an anti-Roman form of Christianity, I can assure you. It's in the imperial family. And I think it has a lot to do with Paul, Epaphroditus, and others. I think they were taking vengeance and Josephus for the death of, certainly the death of Epaphroditus and Flavius Clemens, whom I think the two deaths are connected. Domitian said he executed Epaphroditus, who was at that point still his secretary for Greek letters, because he dared to raise his hand against an emperor, meaning that he had helped Nero commit suicide. Basically, maybe he'd held the knife that Nero ran into or whatever. He didn't assassinate Nero himself, and he helped Nero kill himself, but that was the excuse that Domitian used to have him executed. So there's a lot going on here, and Domitian is as ferocious as Nero. He's considered just as bad, and Eusebius will tell us a lot about him. I've just given you a history of all the Roman emperors in about 10 minutes there, so you can fill in the rest yourself. Clement, therefore, where we are here in this book, does give us some of this testimony about James missing from Acts. Again, I feel that that shows already the holes in Acts. Acts has to be treated with very much care. Some Christian scholars say they dismiss Acts absolutely. That's totally unreliable. I don't. I think Acts can be made sense of as long as you try to read under what it's saying to where it got its material that it transforms from. To my mind, Acts is transforming material, making it sometimes into nonsense material, superstitious, silly material, and we'll look at it when we get to it. But under the veneer, like little pebbles sparkling under a stream, you can see the kernels of the original history that it transforms. Why would it transform anything? Well, why does the Russian Comintern transform things? Rub at people's pictures out of pictures and things like that in the interests of a political or ideological doctrine. And certain facts become inconvenient, and therefore they have to be either changed or erased or made silly, turned into nonsense. So Acts is a holy book, it wouldn't do that. Well, I think the very fact right here that we're missing things begins to show that there are problems with Acts. Again, Christian scholars dismiss Acts as totally unreliable. I don't. I think Acts is, you can dig under the surface of Acts and find out what happened to some extent. And from Acts 16 on, it becomes very reliable. You say, well, how do you know that? Oh, you just can intuit it from the material. It changes its tone. All the supernatural material disappears, all the superstitious material disappears. It becomes very down to earth, very prosaic, and it changes its narrative from the third person to the first person. So what do you mean third person? Well, he, they, it did something, and rather it becomes we did something. It becomes first person plural. It's like a report that's given to someone or a diary. So part of the last 10 chapters of Acts are on either from a report or a diary. And I think it's probably Luke's diary, which is why Acts is attributed to Luke. And that's often very reliable material, and very down to earth. And it says, we went here, we went there, we did this, we did that, we stopped here, we went there, and there's no like, you know, heavens opening, spirits coming down, people speaking in tongues, resurrections, curings, all this miraculous stuff that becomes part and parcel of earlier materials. You say, what? You don't accept that? It doesn't recommend itself historically to me in a very strong way. I mean, when I was young, I accepted it because I was a fool. It takes a long time to grow out of childish dependencies on written words. I mean, because you don't have the feeling that you're confident enough, you don't have the prestige in yourself. You say 10 billion other people have accepted this, all authorities believe it, all authorities pass it on to the next generation. I can't doubt this, it must be true. And so I tried to figure out how it could be true until I began to develop enough historical knowledge to realize, well, look, in fact, I don't consider any of this to have happened. But I didn't think that when I was 25. I didn't even think that when I was 35. It took me to about, I was in my 40s to realize that these are literary matters and not historical matters. I'll just say one last thing about that for those of you who want to get into arguments about that, which I don't really want to argue about. In the university, we just don't entertain supernatural events. Those are things that are entertained in churches. If I go into the physics department and say this plane is being held up in the air because of a supernatural gremlin, they're not going to allow me to do further work in the physics department, because we can't have airplanes that are not tested down to the final nut and bolt going up in the air. As we found out with the Challenger disaster and others, every little screw has to be tested, and it has to be verified experimentally. So in the religious studies field, we can get away with a lot that you can't get away with in electronics, history, and other things. But I think in a university we have to toe the same line, and we are not able to measure supernatural events in a natural setting. It's not possible, and therefore we cannot teach supernatural events in a university classroom. These are, by definition, not measurable by natural means. That's why they're called supernatural. So for the time being in university, we just set them aside. But one last thing I'll say about supernatural events. When someone comes to you now, and I think I've said this already to you, and comes and sits down, as I've said, down in the cafeteria or someplace, and says, I was just driving up to campus today, and the Holy Ghost appeared to me. Or the heavens opened and I saw the Christ standing, and so on and so forth. Or an angel appeared to me. If someone approached you